Hey you. Yeah, you. Ever think about random pieces of history? No? Well, I do, and I was thinking about Pompeii. You might think I'm referring to when it was covered in magma and ash, effectively freezing the town in time, but no. What I was referring to is about this. What was the average day in Pompeii like before the eruption? How did the city even form? Well, we most certainly aren't going to find out sitting in this black void, that's for sure. So, let's start in 8th century BC. In this time period, the first settlements near what was known as Pompeii was formed, the founders being the Oscans, who were the population of central Italy at the time. And fast forward to 740 BC, Pompeii had entered the possession of the Hellenic people, a temple called the Doric Temple forming what would later become the Triangular Forum, and during the same time period, the cult of Apollo formed, Greek and Phoenician sailors using location as a safe port. Skipping ahead yet again, it is now 6th century BC, and the settlements merged into one singular community, being in the middle of the crossroads Cumae, Nola, and Stabai, which were very important at the time. The settlement was surrounded by a newly constructed tufa wall, or Papamonte wall if you want to use a fancy word for it, which was odd considering it was mostly agricultural land that it was protecting, but it also indicates that the settlement was already important and wealthy as it began to prosper and flourish, maritime trade being kicked off with a newly built port near the mouth of the river. And by 524 BC, the city was in control of the Etruscans, which surprisingly didn't dominate the town for military strength, but just controlled it, I guess. Regardless, it was left to its own devices. The town joined the Etruscans League of Cities, the defense of the town being improved with 2 facades of a relatively thin slabs of Sarno limestone, some 4 meters apart filled with earth, or dirt, which was the orthostate wall. And in 474 BC, the Greek city of Cumae decided, fuck them Etruscans, and teamed up with the Syracuse to defeat the Etruscans in the Battle of Cumae and regain control of the area. And then we enter what history likes to call the Samnite period. Lasting from 450 to 375 BC, the city of Pompeii was, not doing too great, as large portions of the city were either abandoned between 423 to 420 BC. The area had been conquered by the Samnite people who were allies of Rome at the time. They had slowly imposed their architecture and enlarged the town. Now, there was something called the Samnite Wars, but Pompeii largely remained loyal to Rome and only really improved their wall. And after said war in 290 BC, Pompeii was forced to accept the status of the Scoci of Rome, but they were largely left to their own devices yet again. Now it's 218 BC, and the Second Punic Wars have kicked off. Pompeii has chosen to remain loyal to Rome. And because of that, an additional wall was built, and surprisingly enough, Pompeii is still flourishing, mostly due to the production of wine and oil, which they sold to Provence and Spain, though crops were also a point to the city's success. Now we enter what is known as the Roman period. Pompeii had rebelled against Rome for something called the Social Wars, and in 89 BC, it was besieged by Sulla, who targeted one of Pompeii's weaker entrances, Porta Ercolano, with artillery. And despite having a decent defense otherwise, the city was forced to surrender after the conquest of Nola. The city was renamed to Colonia Colurna Vernius Pompeianorum, or simply Pompeii. God, I butchered that so badly. The city was granted Roman citizenship, and some people were given land and property in and around the city if they were veterans of Sulla. Some people lost their lands. Despite that, they assimilated into Roman life easily enough, their language becoming Latin, many wealthy families even making their names Latin to show their loyalty to Rome. Farms and villas were formed around the city due to the desire to live on the Bay of Naples and equally the rich agricultural land. Nothing too interesting happened during this period. Mostly the town grew. There was a riot in 59 AD, which a bunch of residents of Pompeii and some folks called the Neuricians got into a fight in an amphitheater, after which the Roman Senate sent a Praetorian Guard to restore peace and ban any further events for about 10 years. It is now 62 and 79 AD, and Pompeii has been dealing with minor earthquakes, which was relatively normal for the area, but on February 5th, a severe earthquake damaged the surrounding area, including Pompeii. 2 sacrifices were held, and a feast to honor the dead of the city. But during the earthquake, it caused even more panic when oil lamps fell over, setting some things on fire. And after fast forwarding one more time, and some reconstruction efforts, Pompeii became a great city. Emperor Nero had visited it along with his wife, who gave gifts to the Temple of Venus, which was the city's patron deity, and by 79 AD, the city had a population around 20,000 people. It was well known for its fertility and its beautiful location, and since good things don't last forever, it happened. In the same year, Mount Vesuvius erupted, lasting over 2 days. The pumice rain lasting a full 18 hours, but believe it or not, most people actually escaped Pompeii. Only around 1,150 bodies were found years later. And that brings us to our last remaining question. What was life in Pompeii like? Well, it was effectively like modern-day Miami. It was a massive city that people visited for the sights and city. If you were rich and wanted to show your wealth, you owned property, operated a business of sorts, and generally enjoyed life living by the coast. If you were poor, you farmed the land, sold all your crops at the dock so it could be sold to some other city. You went home to your family and enjoyed your land. Regardless of class, however, the city would fall, and efforts to examine the city in depth didn't happen until roughly 2,000 years later. Now, I will say that most of what I said was written on Wikipedia, which is pretty reliable, all things considered, but I'll just say this. I'm not a historian. I'm a dum-dum on the internet who don't know shit. So, if you're interested in the history of Pompeii, go look it up. It's cool. Alright, that's all from me. See ya.